There are moments in life when silence is not just a choice. It is a quiet form of strength, not the silence of fear nor of defeat, but a conscious silence, a silence that comes from clarity, a decision that whispers, I don't need to react. I will let life move. I will let karma do what karma does best. In our modern world, reaction has become a reflex. We see something wrong. We speak out. Someone misjudges us. We defend. Injustice occurs. We feel the urge to make it right now. And yes, sometimes we must speak, but not always. Buddhism, especially Zen and mindfulness teachings, reminds us of a deeper truth. When you choose silence at the right moment, you step out of the cycle of karma. And when you stop feeding the fire of reactivity, you break free from the wheel of suffering. There are times when the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all. Think about it. When someone insults you and you don't strike back, when you've been betrayed but choose not to seek revenge, when you witness injustice but remain inwardly calm, you are practicing one of the highest forms of mindfulness. Not because you're weak, but because you are strong enough not to get pulled into someone else's chaos. Because you trust in the unseen workings of karma. Because you've grown wise enough to understand that everything unfolds in its own time. In today's video on mindful healing, we'll explore 7 powerful moments in life when silence is not avoidance, but deep wisdom. Moments like when you're lied about and choose not to defend, when someone betrays you and you walk away in peace, when jealousy disguises itself as criticism and you rise above it, when arguments are traps and you simply step away, when others try to pull you down and you hold your ground, when your kindness is unappreciated and you remain kind anyway. And finally, when life feels unfair and you trust that karma sees what you cannot. This is not a lesson in passivity. This is not about being quiet because you're afraid. This is a lesson in letting go, without falling apart, in how to stay rooted while everything around you shakes, in how to choose stillness not because you're silent, but because you are awake. This is the path from reaction to reflection, from anger to insight, from words to sacred silence. If you're in a season of life where you're tired of having to explain yourself, tired of being misunderstood, tired of always having to prove you're right, then this video is your invitation to return to stillness, to choose presence over performance, to release the need to correct and instead trust. Because sometimes silence is not a gap. It's not a void. It's a space where truth begins to bloom without interference. Silence is not giving up. It's a return to your center, a return to self-trust, a return to the deep knowing that truth will reveal itself in time, balance will be restored to the right people, and karma always finds its way. So are you ready? Let's begin our journey through 7 moments when silence becomes your greatest wisdom and karma becomes your voice. Chapter 1. The Quiet Mirror. When lies surround you. There's a particular kind of ache that comes not from injury or loss, but from being misunderstood, deliberately twisted by falsehoods, judged by whispers, or misrepresented by those who never truly knew you. It is the ache of being lied about. When we hear something untrue about ourselves, especially if it's deeply personal or malicious, our natural reaction is to jump up and say, "That's not true. Here's the proof." It feels like a moral obligation, like an injustice that must be immediately corrected. But sometimes, with those who hold strong prejudices or deliberately choose not to understand, explaining doesn't bring any benefit. Let me ask you this. Have you ever tried to argue with someone who had already made up their mind about you? It's like shouting into a storm. No one hears the truth. Your words are swept away by noise, opinion, and ego. I remember a time in my early 30s when a professional conflict spiraled into a wave of rumors. A colleague, feeling threatened by a promotion I was considered for, began spreading subtle falsehoods about me. He never made outright accusations, but he seeded doubts in others. Quiet poison. At first, I was furious. I spent days crafting emails in my head, imagining conversations where I would defend myself and reveal the truth. But then something shifted in me. I asked myself, what if my energy is better spent simply doing good work, being who I really am, and letting people see the truth for themselves? That shift changed everything. The wisdom of Buddhist silence. The more you struggle against a lie, the more life you give it. The Buddha once said, 3 things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. Why do we forget that? Why do we rush to defend ourselves, to set the record straight, even when no one is listening? Because the ego craves validation. It fears invisibility. It fears injustice. But the spirit, when aligned with wisdom, does not fear. It knows. In Zen practice, silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of depth. It is the choice to be still, not because we have nothing to say, but because what we might say would only blur the clarity that time will bring. Silence is not surrender. It's mastery. Many mistake silence for weakness, but true silence, the kind rooted in wisdom, is one of the most powerful responses we have. It doesn't mean doing nothing. It means choosing where to place your energy. When you refrain from reacting to lies, you are not allowing others to walk over you. You are rising above them. You are saying, I know who I am. I don't need your version of me to be erased for my truth to exist. Let me tell you about Ava, a yoga teacher I met during a retreat in Thailand. Ava had spent years building a small studio in her hometown, a sanctuary of peace and healing. But one day a competitor accused her of plagiarism, saying she stole class routines and spiritual content from others. It was untrue, but screenshots were taken out of context. Emails were twisted. Her name was dragged through digital mud. Everyone told her to fight, to hire a lawyer, to make a public statement. But she didn't. Instead, she closed her laptop, took a deep breath, and did something radical. She showed up for her students. She kept teaching. She kept loving. A year later, her accuser's studio closed down. Not because Ava won, but because the truth unfolded on its own. Her silence wasn't emptiness. It was presence. It was rootedness. And the people who mattered could feel it. In times of deception, your silence becomes a mirror. It reflects back the character of those around you. Some will see your stillness as guilt. Others will recognize it as grace. But most importantly, it reveals you to yourself. Can you remain centered in the storm? Can you release the need to be seen as right and trust that your actions will speak in time? Because here's the truth. You are not obligated to correct every lie told about you. You are not responsible for other people's misunderstandings, projections, or insecurities. You are only responsible for your alignment with peace, with truth, with your higher self. Let karma speak. Karma does not need your defense. It does not sleep. It does not forget. It moves slowly, yes. But when it arrives, it does so with perfect clarity. When you stay silent, you are stepping out of its way and allowing justice, divine, not performative, to unfold. Silence, then, is not absence. It is space. It is a sacred pause in which truth takes root. So when someone lies about you, whether it's at work, in your family, online, or in whispers behind your back, ask yourself, do I need to respond? Or do I need to return to myself? Will speaking up bring truth or just more noise? What would happen if I simply continued living in integrity and let karma handle the rest? Because in the end, lies may burn bright for a moment, but truth, like the sun, always rises. Chapter 2, The Silent Goodbye. when betrayal finds you. There are few wounds as piercing as betrayal. Unlike the sharpness of a stranger's criticism, betrayal comes with a silent scream. The ache of being hurt by someone you once trusted, someone you may have defended, confided in, perhaps even loved. And when that sacred bond is broken, it feels like the world tilts ever so slightly on its axis. Yet amid this pain, there exists a rare kind of power. A power that doesn't come from confrontation or revenge. A power that arises from choosing silence as your response and goodbye as your liberation. Why betrayal cuts so deep? We are social beings. It's tempting to ask, how could they? We search for explanations, closure, apologies, but often betrayal offers none. Just a door that shuts quietly behind us. We build our lives not just on ideas and actions, but on relationships. The heart trusts, eagerly, sometimes blindly. We give parts of ourselves in hopes that they'll be held with care. So when someone betrays that trust, we don't just grieve the person, we grieve the version of ourselves that existed when we believed in them. And that's where many suffer the most. Not from the betrayal itself, but from the desperate need to make sense of it. A lesson from the Dharma. In Buddhist teachings, betrayal is not seen as a punishment, but as a revelation. It is a mirror that no longer flatters us. It reflects not only the nature of the betrayer, but also our own expectations. How tightly we held on. How much we needed something from someone that perhaps they were never able to give. The Buddha once said, "Attachment is the root of suffering, and betrayal exposes attachment in its rawest form." Our attachment to loyalty, to fairness, to imagined futures. When someone turns their back on us, they're also turning away from the role we cast them in. And it hurts, not only because they left, but because they didn't play the part we hoped they would. But here lies the gift. When a person walks away from you through betrayal, they also free you from an illusion. And illusions, my friend, are the heaviest weights to carry. Silence isn't about them, it's about you. When betrayal strikes, silence feels counterintuitive. We want to be heard, understood, validated. We want the betrayer to know what they've done. But here's the truth. They already know. And if they don't, your words won't reach them. In Buddhist psychology, there's a concept called upekkha. It means equanimity, a peaceful detachment born from inner clarity. When you practice upekkha in the face of betrayal, you are not hardening your heart. You are softening your attachment to pain. You are saying, "This hurt me, but it will not define me." Silence doesn't mean your pain doesn't matter. It means your healing matters more. And goodbye? It's not always a loss. Sometimes it's the most sacred form of self-respect. When someone betrays you, remember this. You don't owe them your anger. You don't owe them your voice. Sometimes your silence is the lesson. And your peace, that's the reward. Chapter 3. Beyond envy. When jealousy masks itself as criticism. Sometimes criticism doesn't come from a place of wisdom. It doesn't aim to guide, teach, or uplift. Sometimes it's a whisper of insecurity, cloaked in reason, a shadow that calls itself light, a dagger dressed in advice, the hidden face of jealousy. Jealousy is a curious emotion. It rarely announces itself. It doesn't storm through the door shouting, "I feel small in your presence." No, it comes quietly through side comments, passive-aggressive jabs, subtle dismissals. It shows up as a friend who suddenly critiques every success you have, as a colleague who just wants to help by tearing your ideas down, as a sibling who says, "Must be nice to have it so easy," when they know how hard you've worked. Envy is pain that hasn't learned how to speak honestly, so it attacks what it admires, because your light reminds others of where they've dimmed their own. I remember giving a keynote speech at a mindfulness conference a few years ago. It was one of those rare moments where everything aligned. The words flowed, The room listened deeply, and I felt like I had truly offered something, not just spoken. Afterward, a peer I respected walked up to me. I expected a word of support. Instead, she said with a cool smile, "It was nice. A little too emotional maybe, but nice." It was meant to sound kind. It wasn't. Something in her eyes wasn't interested in connection. It wanted control. For a moment, my confidence wavered. I wondered, was I too much? Did I lose my audience? Should I have been more polished or academic? But then I remembered something my teacher once told me. Envy wears many masks. If you listen too closely to its voice, you will silence your own. So I smiled, I thanked her, and I stayed silent. Because I knew that moment wasn't about fixing myself. It was about protecting my peace from someone who didn't know how to tend to their own wounds. The Buddhist lens, jealousy as suffering. In Buddhist psychology, jealousy is not a sin. It is a form of dukkha, suffering. It arises when we compare ourselves to others and believe we fall short. When we measure our worth by someone else's blessings, forgetting the seeds we're meant to water in our own garden. The third of the 5 hindrances in meditation practice is ill will, and jealousy often rides in on its back. Instead of celebrating someone's path, the mind generates aversion. They don't deserve that. Why not me? What makes them special? It's them. This is not evil. It's a cry for wholeness. But it can become harmful when it spills onto others. That's why when someone disrespects you out of jealousy, you must remember it's not your job to fix their pain. It's your task to remain centered in your own. A parable of the jealous disciple. There's a story from the Zen tradition about an elderly sculptor who was revered for his mastery. His students adored him, and he spent his days teaching with gentleness and grace. Among his pupils was a younger man named Jun, incredibly skilled but plagued by envy. No matter how much praise Jun received, it never felt like enough. He wanted to outshine the master. He wanted glory. One day during a temple ceremony, Jun presented his own sculpture, a stunning piece carved with precision. The crowd gasped in admiration. But instead of thanking his teacher for guiding him there, Jun turned and said aloud, "Unlike some, I believe in evolution over tradition." Everyone grew quiet. The jab was clear. The master only smiled. He bowed gently to Jun and said, "Every sculptor leaves their truth in the stone." He didn't defend himself. He didn't scold Jun. He let the moment pass like a cloud over the moon. Years later, when the master had long passed, people still visited his works, revering their depth and serenity. Jun's fame had faded, his brilliance dimmed by bitterness. What happens when you stay silent? When jealousy targets you, staying silent may feel like surrender, but it's the opposite. You are not avoiding conflict. You are choosing not to participate in someone else's inner war. Because if you respond with anger or defense, you feed the fire. But if you stay still, the fire consumes only its own fuel. There's something deeply powerful in that choice. You let karma work quietly. You keep your dignity. And you honor the truth that envy cannot touch, your self-worth. Let karma teach what you cannot. Here's the secret. You don't need to win against envy. You need to rise beyond it. And the way you do that isn't through debates or call-outs. It's through continued integrity. It's through quiet radiance. It's through doing your work and letting your results echo louder than any insult ever could. Karma, as always, is listening. And when someone seeks to dim your light out of jealousy, let their lesson be their own. Your role is simple. Shine anyway. Chapter 4. The Energy Thief. When arguments are a trap. There are people who don't seek truth. They seek victory. They don't want to understand. They want to dominate. And often the battlefield they choose is your peace. Arguments, especially the ones designed to provoke, are not just about words. They are invitations. Invitations to step off your path and enter someone else's storm. Invitations to drain your energy, question your clarity, and lose sight of the silence within you. But here's the quiet truth. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Some doors are best left unopened. When the ego demands a fight, the ego loves conflict. It feeds on being right. It thrives on defense. And when someone throws a verbal dagger your way, the ego leaps forward. They can't speak to me like that. I need to defend myself. I have to make them see the truth. But let's pause for a moment. Have you ever actually won an argument with someone who wasn't listening? Someone whose mind was made up long before you spoke? In Buddhism, one of the 10 fetters that bind us to suffering is conceit, the belief that our view must be protected at all costs. And what are arguments if not temples built around our own opinions? Sometimes the most enlightened thing you can do is walk away. Not all arguments are rooted in injustice. Some are rooted in hunger, a hunger for attention, drama, or validation. We all know someone like this. The person who corrects you just to feel superior. The co-worker who nitpicks every suggestion you make. The family member who starts an argument at every holiday dinner. These individuals are not seeking resolution. They are seeking emotional fuel, and if you offer it, they will consume it, along with your time, peace, and focus. You become entangled in a dance where no one leads and everyone stumbles. But when you refuse to engage, something incredible happens. You break the pattern, you step out of their game, and they are left dancing alone. I once had a neighbor who, for reasons unknown, seemed determined to find fault with me. If I parked slightly over the line, he left notes. If I had friends over, he made noise complaints. Even my wind chimes became a public disturbance. I spent months stewing over how to respond. I wrote letters. I planned dialogues in my head. And then one day, after another passive-aggressive message taped to my door, I sat quietly and asked myself, is this the life I want to live? Constantly reacting to someone else's chaos? I decided right then I would no longer respond. No letters, no confrontation, no more thoughts spent on him. Instead, I offered him a silent blessing every time I saw him. May you find peace so that you no longer need to steal mine. Within 6 months, he moved, and I never had to raise my voice. I didn't win, I just didn't play. The spiritual practice of non-reaction. In Zen Wu Wei, the principle of non-action doesn't mean doing nothing. It means choosing the most harmonious action, which is sometimes no action at all. Refusing to argue isn't avoidance, it's alignment. It means you value your energy too much to waste it on people who misunderstand it. When you engage in an argument with someone rooted in ego or insecurity, you are stepping into a mud pit. You may throw good points, but in the end, you're both covered in dirt. Let karma handle the noise. When someone tries to argue with you for no reason, let them. Let them build their drama. Let them shout into the void. Let them throw their gifts of insult and accusation. You, however, have the right to stay rooted. Because here's the truth. Karma listens even when you stay silent. And those who sow chaos out of habit will, in time, meet the mirror of their own energy. You don't need to speed up that process. Just don't slow yourself down by joining them. Chapter 5, Be silent when others try to bring you down. Not everyone will celebrate your light. Some will squint. Some will criticize. Some will try to blow out the flame altogether. And often, the ones trying hardest to tear you down are the ones who feel the smallest in your presence. But let me say this as clearly as I can. Their reaction to your light is not your responsibility. Your only responsibility is to keep shining. When joy becomes a target, it's a strange thing, isn't it? You work hard, you grow, you heal, you finally start to feel good in your skin, And then, almost out of nowhere, someone shows up to diminish you. They make subtle comments. You've changed. Must be nice to have time for that spiritual stuff. Don't get too full of yourself. These aren't just random words. They're reflections of discomfort. Discomfort with your growth. Discomfort with your boundaries. Discomfort with the fact that you're no longer playing small to keep others comfortable. But the truth is, people who try to bring you down are already below you, not in worth, but in awareness. They don't see the full picture. They don't feel what you've had to overcome to get here. The Buddhist view, turning poison into medicine. In Buddhist thought, we are taught to see those who hurt us not as enemies, but as teachers. The Dalai Lama once said, "Our enemies are our greatest teachers because they show us where we are still reactive, where we are still attached, where we are still not free." Their criticism is not a reflection of your value. It's a test of your inner stability. And in the silence that follows, you can learn to transmute their poison into wisdom. When you don't fight back, you grow. There's a kind of dignity that blooms when you don't respond. Not because you're ignoring what happened, not because you're weak, but because you've outgrown the need to be understood by everyone. You know your path, you know your why, and anyone who can't see that is not meant to walk beside you. When someone tries to bring you down, especially when you're doing something aligned with your soul, take it as confirmation that you're moving in the right direction. The taller you grow, the more wind you'll face. But trees don't shrink to avoid storms. They grow deeper roots, the unshakable self. Practicing inner stability. In the practice of samatha, calm, abiding meditation, monks are trained to cultivate mental stability, like a flame unmoved by wind. You can practice this too. When someone insults you, pause. Feel your breath. Let it pass. When someone questions your worth, remember the work you've done to get here. When someone doubts your vision, stand tall anyway. This is not arrogance, it's reverence for your own becoming. The unshakable self is not hardened or closed off. It is soft but immovable. It is like a lotus growing in the mud, untouched by the dirt below. Let karma handle what you cannot. You don't have to retaliate. You don't need to convince. You don't even need to respond. Because karma hears the things said behind closed doors. It sees the actions masked as concern, and it always returns what is sown, whether in silence or in noise. So let karma handle what your words cannot. Let it move in the unseen spaces. Let it be the justice that needs no defense. Chapter 6. The Quiet Kindness. When your generosity goes unappreciated, there is a silent heartbreak that many of us carry, not because we gave too little, but because we gave so much, and it wasn't seen. Or worse, it was taken for granted. You opened your hands. You gave your time, your energy, your love, your care, and in return, you got silence, or indifference, or entitlement. And in those moments, something inside you whispers, was it even worth it? When kindness feels invisible, we live in a world that often keeps score. How much we give, how much we get, who noticed, who didn't. And yet, true kindness lives outside that scoreboard. It gives not to receive, but to release. Still, it's hard, isn't it? You help someone during their darkest days, and when you stumble, they're nowhere to be found. You offer forgiveness and patience, and they treat it like weakness. You show up consistently, and they disappear when it's your turn. It's easy to feel resentment, to close the door, to become cold. But Buddhism teaches us a different way, a quieter way, a way that doesn't harden the heart but clarifies it, a teaching from the Dhammapada. In the Dhammapada, a collection of the Buddha's teachings, there's a simple yet profound verse. Let one not neglect duty to one's own welfare. However, for the welfare of others, let one be discerning. This means be kind, yes, but be wise in your kindness. Give with love, but not with attachment. Serve with compassion, but not with self-neglect, because generosity without discernment becomes sacrifice, and sacrifice, when not chosen consciously, becomes suffering. There's a story I heard from a Theravada monk in Sri Lanka, a story that lives with me still. A kind man once took in a traveler during a monsoon. His home was small, his food limited, but he gave freely. The traveler stayed the night, enjoyed his warmth, his bread, his generosity. By morning, the traveler had vanished, along with a pouch of coins from the man's shelf. The villagers raged. "You were a fool," they cried. "You trusted a stranger." But the man simply smiled and said, "If he had to steal, perhaps his suffering was greater than mine. I gave once. He took twice. That is on him, not me." He never spoke of it again, and that winter, the village supported him more than ever, not because he asked, but because kindness plants seeds you may never see grow. That man's strength wasn't in getting something back. It was in not letting someone else's actions change who he was. When you're tempted to close your heart, if you've ever thought, "I'm done being nice. People don't deserve my kindness. Next time, I'll let them struggle." You're not alone. That's the voice of pain talking, of exhaustion, of disappointment. But that's not your true voice. Because if you listen deeper, beyond the wound, you'll hear something softer. "I still believe in love. I just want it to be safe." And that's fair. Your kindness deserves safety. But closing your heart won't protect it. It will only imprison it. The answer is not to stop giving. The answer is to let go of expecting anything in return. What Buddhism says about unreciprocated giving. In Buddhism, dana is the practice of generosity. It's one of the 10 perfections, paramitas, on the path to enlightenment. But here's what's often missed. True dana is unconditional. It's giving with a clean heart, no strings, no scorecard. The more we expect from our giving, the more it becomes a transaction. And transactions belong to the world of ego, not spirit. So the teaching is this: give what you can, when you can, and then let go. Let the giving complete itself within you, not in the response of others. That is freedom. Let silence be the container of your kindness. When your kindness goes unseen, let silence hold it. Let your good deeds drop into the river of life without watching where the ripples go. Because karma keeps perfect count, even when no one else is watching. And the energy you offer in love always returns, though not always in the way you expect. Maybe the person won't thank you. Maybe they won't even remember. But someone somewhere will be nourished by the ripple you created. And the universe will whisper, "Keep going. You're doing it right." When to walk away with love. Still, there's wisdom in knowing when to stop offering kindness to those who constantly misuse it. If someone repeatedly takes and never gives, if your kindness is met with cruelty or manipulation, if your light is only valued when it serves someone else's comfort, it's okay to walk away. Not with resentment, not with revenge, but with love for yourself. As the Buddha taught, you, yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is preserve your own well-being. The quiet kindness that changes everything. Here's what I've learned. You don't need to be acknowledged to be impactful. You don't need applause to keep giving. You don't need others to understand your heart in order to live with integrity. The quietest acts of love often create the loudest shifts in the world. And the more you release the need to be seen, the more clearly you will see. Chapter 7. When life feels unfair. Trusting the invisible workings of karma. There will be seasons in your life when everything feels upside down. You give your best and still lose. You love deeply and are left behind. You do the right thing and suffer for it. And in those moments, a question rises like a knot in the throat. Why me? You look at others, some careless, some cruel, and they seem to thrive. You wonder if the universe has forgotten you, if karma has fallen asleep, if there's any point in continuing to be kind, patient, or good. But here's the truth I want you to hold on to like a candle in the dark. Karma never forgets. It may be slow, it may be silent, but it is always in motion. There's a particular kind of suffering that arises not from pain itself, but from its lack of explanation. You think, I did everything right, I followed the path, I kept the faith, why is this happening? And when there's no answer, silence can feel like betrayal. But Buddhist wisdom offers us a different lens. It tells us, what you experience now is not the full picture. Life unfolds across lifetimes, not just moments. That's not to say your pain isn't real. It is, but it's not meaningless. Even suffering, when approached with mindfulness, becomes part of your awakening. A parable of the storm field. There is an old story from the Buddhist tradition about a farmer who spent months preparing his field. He tilled the soil with care, planted the seeds with intention, prayed with gratitude each morning as the sun rose over his land. Then one night, a violent storm came. Torrential rain, lightning, flood. By morning, his crops were gone. The villagers pitied him. "You worked so hard," they said. "It's not fair." But the farmer did not curse the sky. He did not shake his fists at the heavens. He simply bowed his head and said, "I planted with love, and I will plant again." That year, when the rains returned at the proper season, his field bloomed with double the harvest. The lesson? Not every loss is punishment. Sometimes it is preparation. The wisdom of waiting in Buddhist teachings, patience is not passive. It's an active spiritual strength, kshanti in Pali. It's the courage to endure without bitterness, to stay grounded while the unseen unfolds. Because just like the wind cannot be seen but still moves the trees, karma operates invisibly, rearranging things on your behalf. It's the delay that protects you, the rejection that redirects you, the silence that saves you. And though it may feel like life is unfair, the deeper truth is, life is precise. What is meant for you cannot be taken. What is not meant for you cannot be forced. When the heart wants to close. Of course, there will be days when you want to give up, when you say, being good doesn't work. I'm tired of believing. Let the world burn. I'm done caring. Those are natural reactions. They are the voice of a heart that feels unseen. But don't build a home in that place. Rest there if you must, but don't unpack. Because eventually you will remember. You don't act with integrity for the outcome. You do it because it's who you are. Your kindness is not a tool to control karma. Your goodness is not a shortcut to reward. It is the offering of your soul, the sacred signature of your spirit, and that no matter what happens is never wasted. What karma really means in the West, karma is often misunderstood as punishment. But in truth, karma means action. And more importantly, the ripple of action. Every thought, word, and deed creates momentum. And while you may not see immediate results, the energy moves. It travels, it accumulates, it returns. Your patience is planting seeds. Your silence is watering wisdom. Your calm in chaos is nurturing peace you haven't met yet. So when life feels unfair, remember, it's not over. It's unfolding. The final blessing of silence. When life feels unfair and no answer comes, be still. Sit with your breath. Let the wind of time carry your pain. Let the silence do its unseen work. Because somewhere down the path, maybe in this lifetime, maybe the next, you will look back and say, that storm was the seed. That silence was the bridge. That loss was the doorway. And you'll thank the very thing you once cursed. As we come to the end of this journey through the 7 times silence becomes our greatest teacher, perhaps you've begun to see it not as avoidance, but as alignment. Silence is not weakness. It is not giving up. It is not hiding. In the eyes of Zen and Buddhist wisdom, silence is an act of mastery. It is the art of choosing your battles, and more importantly, of choosing your peace. It is the way you say, I know who I am. I don't need to scream to prove it. I don't need to engage to defend it. I trust that the truth and karma will unfold in time. 7 doors, 7 moments to choose stillness. When lies surround you, silence lets time and truth do what your words cannot. When betrayal wounds you, silence becomes your dignified goodbye. When jealousy hides behind criticism, silence keeps your energy rooted and unshaken. When conflict is bait, silence protects your clarity. When others try to bring you down, silence becomes your higher ground. When your kindness goes unnoticed, silence holds space for self-love. And when life feels unfair, silence becomes an act of trust in the unseen workings of karma. Karma never sleeps. Karma is not punishment. It's not some divine scoreboard. It is simply the natural law of cause and effect, the echo of energy returning home. When you act with love, with patience, with integrity, even if the world doesn't reward it immediately, the universe never forgets. Let karma do what it was designed to do. Your only job is to keep your side clean, to stay kind, to stay centered, to stay awake. Let this video be a space for you to exhale, to remember that peace doesn't shout. Peace is still, peace listens, and peace begins with the choice not to react. Thank you for walking with me through these 7 quiet meditations. May we meet again in the next moment of healing, right here at Mindful Healing, with presence, with grace, with deep respect. Namaste.